Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Vijana Vallabha Girivardhari Govijana Vallabha Girivardhari Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Govijana Vallabha Girivardhari Vijana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashoda Nandana Braja Janarandana Yashoda Nandana Braja Janarandana Yashoda Yamunatira Banacharya Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Govijana Vallabha Girivardhari Govijana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashoda Nandana Braja Janarandana Yashoda Nandana Braja Janarandana Yamunatira Banacharya Yamunatira Banacharya Yamunatira Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Jai Guru Vishnu Vishnu Paramahamsa Parivra Jakacharya Asto Tarasat Srimad His Divine Grace of High Charana Rabbi Bhakti Swami Prabhupada Ki ISKCON and BBD Foundercharya save the whole world Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Nitya Vishnu Vishnupada Paramahansa Parivra Jakacharya Asto Tarasat Srimad His Divine Grace of Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Nama Acharya Haridas Thakur Ki Premsika Ho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sri Hari Bhakti Ki Sri Radha Krishna Govardhana Shamakund Radha Kund Giri Govardhana Ki Braj Bhumi Shri Dama Dama Ki Navnit Mayapur Dama Ki Purushtam Chacha Jaganapuri Dama Ki Ganga Mai Ki Jamuna Mai Ki Bhakti Devi Ki Tulasi Maharani Ki Samaveta Bhakti Vrinda Ki Jai Nitai Go all glories and glories, all glories and glories, all glories and glories, all glories, all glories, all glories, Shri Guru and Shri Guranga, all glories to Prabhupada Ki Jai, Krishna Krishna. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. I'm just sorry to ask, can you give me some water? Nunam Nripanam Srimad Patanam Nunam Nipanam Srimadot Patanam Nunam Nipanam Srimadot Patanam Mahim Mahush Shalayatang Chamubi Mahim Mahush Shalayatam Chamubi Mahim Mahushchalayatang Chamubi Nunam Nipanam Trimadot Patanam Mahim Mahushchalayatang Chamubi Vadat Prapanati Jihir Shayesho Vadat Prapanati Jihir Shayesho Vadat Prapanati Jihir Shayesho Api Upaik Shatagam Bhagavan Kurunam Api Upaikshitagam Bhagavan Kurunam Api Upaikshagatam Bhagavan Kurunam Vadat Prapanati Jihi Shayesho Api Upaikshakatam Bhagavan Kurunam. It's a little bit, the last line's a little bit difficult because actually the way the verse is, there's 2 lines, but we do it in 4 lines. And in order to make the meter fit, you'll see how the A's been dropped off at the start, because that adds, it removes a syllable. And usually when you find that when there's a syllable drop from the start, you run the 2 words together. But because we've broken into 4 lines, then one's up with an extra syllable. Nunam Nipanam Trimadot Patanam Mahim Muhushchalayatang Chamupi Vadat Prapanati Jihi Shayesho Api Upaikshagam Bhagavan Kurunam Nunam Nripanam Trimadotpatanam Mahim Muhushchalayatang Chamubi Vadat Prapanati Jahir Shayesho Api Yupaikshagatam Bhagavan Gurunam Nunam Nripanam Trimadotpatanam Mahim Muhushchalayatam Chamubi Vadat Prapanati Jahi Shayesho Apyupaikshagatang Bhagavan Kurunam Nunam, of course, Nipanam, of the kings. Three. Mada Utpatanam, going astray out of false pride. Mahim, earth. Muhu, constantly. Chalayatam, agitating. Chamubi, by the movements of soldiers. Bhatat, from the act of killing. Prapana, surrendered. Artijihishaya, willing to relieve the distress of the sufferers. Isha, the Lord. Api, in spite of. Upaikshata, weighted. Agam, offences. Bhagavan, the Supreme Lord. Kurunam, of the Kurus. Translation. Despite his being the Lord and being always willing to relieve the distress of the sufferers, he, Krishna, refrained from killing the Kurus, although they committed all sorts of sins, and although he saw other kings constantly agitating the earth by their strong military movements carried out under the dictation of three kinds of false pride. Is there anything like that happening right now? In the world? No? Seems like there's a fair bit of it going on right now, yeah? All this saber rattling going on around the country, the planet. Yeah, responsibly please. Despite his being the Lord, and being always willing to relieve the distress of the sufferers, he, Krishna, refrained from killing the Kurus, although they committed all sorts of sins, and although he saw other kings constantly agitating the earth by their strong military movements carried out under the dictation of three kinds of false pride. I saw the strong military movements. I saw a video the other day. I'm not sure where it was, but it was just showing all these tanks, just barreling through the countryside. I was just thinking how much damage it causes. They're just like terrorizing the planet. Not to speak of all the citizens on the planet, but just terrorizing the planet with all this horrible military activity. Completely unnecessary. It's just based on false ego. That's all it is. Srila Prabhupada's purport. And this is, please listen carefully. This is a really interesting and powerful purport. As declared in Bhagavad Gita, the Lord appears in the mortal world to execute his much-needed mission of killing the miscreants and giving protection to the suffering faithful. Does anyone know that verse? It's quite a well-known verse in the Gita. Yeah, thank you. Pritranaya saranam vinischaya tradushkam dharma sangstapanataya sambhavami yuge yuge, Krishna says. In spite of that mission Lord Krishna tolerated the insult to Draupadi by the Kurus and the injustices perpetrated against the Pandavas, as well as insults to himself. The question may be raised, why did he tolerate such injustices and insults in his presence? Why did he not chastise the Kurus immediately? When Draupadi was insulted in the assembly by the Kurus by their attempt to see her naked in the presence of all, the Lord protected Draupadi by supplying an unlimited length of clothing. And keep in mind, okay, in the modern day and age, for a woman to be seen in a public assembly with no clothes on is quite common. Isn't it?
I was just in Times Square in New York a few weeks ago, and there were about 8 women walking around just with painted on bikinis.
Yeah, I saw that last time I was there. I was like, what? Where are we? You know? So it's quite common, and people actually, if you say anything about it, you consider to be like conservative, or there's something wrong with you. This is kind of normal. But in this culture, to see a woman naked was considered abominable. So, anyhow, so where were we up to? But he did not chastise the insulting party immediately. The silence of the Lord did not mean, however, that he excused the offences of the Kurus. There were many other kings on earth who had become very proud of 3 kinds of possessions: wealth, education, and followers. And they were constantly agitating the earth by movements of military strength. The Lord was just waiting to get them together on the battlefield of Kurukshetra and kill them all at one time, just to make a shortcut in his killing mission. Krishna's pretty clever, huh? Just to make a shortcut in his killing mission, one time, all of them. Godless kings or heads of state, when puffed up by advancement of material wealth, education, and increase of population, always make a show of military strength and give trouble to the innocent. And this is exactly what's happening on this planet right now. There's so much of it going on, and it's I saw a statement from the Secretary General of the United Nations, and he said all it's going to take is one misstep or one miscalculation, nuclear catastrophe. That's where it is right now. It's just hanging on a precipice. It just takes one guy to misread some, because that's what they're doing. You see that they're constantly prodding and pushing and just seeing how far they can. Just like, someone from the US went to Taiwan. China's saying, don't do it, otherwise there'll be military repercussions. They went ahead and did it. They're just pushing and pushing and pushing. See how far they can push the boundaries before something happens. It just takes one step too far, a nuclear catastrophe. And that's the nature of this world. We're just hovering on the precipice of disaster. And this is pointed out by Lochan Das Thakur. This song we often sing, this Kamala Dala Jala Jivana Talamala. He says, my life, it's just hovering like a drop of water on a lotus leaf. And if you've ever been down to the top dam down here in the rain, you can see like the lotus leaves, they fill up with water. And when there's too much water, they just sort of go over like that, and all the water goes out. And that's what it's like in this material world. At any moment, you have no warning. At any moment, catastrophe. When Lord Krishna was personally present, there were many such kings all over the world, and thus he arranged for the battle of Kurukshetra. In his manifestation of Vishvarupa, the Lord expressed his mission of killing as follows. I have willingly, this is from the Bhagavad Gita, 11th chapter, I have willingly descended on the earth in my capacity of inexorable time, in order to decrease the unwanted population. I shall finish all those who have assembled here, except you, the Pandavas. This killing does not wait for you to take part in it. It is already arranged. All will be killed by me. And you may remember, in the description of the Virat Rupa, how Arjuna was describing how he was seeing all the kings rushing into Krishna's mouth and getting smashed by Krishna. If you want to become famous as a hero of the battlefield, and thus enjoy the booty of war, then, O Savyasachi, just become the immediate cause of this killing, and thus take the credit. I have already killed all the great warriors, Bhishma, Drona, Jayadratha, Karna, and many other great generals. Do not worry. Fight the battle and become famous as a great hero. Bhagavad Gita 11:32-34. The Lord always wants to see his devotee as the hero of some episode which he himself performs. Isn't that wonderful? He doesn't take any credit for himself. He just wants to see his devotee always as the hero. He wanted to see his devotee and friend Arjuna as the hero of the battle of Kurukshetra, and thus he waited for all the miscreants of the world to assemble. That and nothing else is the explanation of his waiting. So Prabhupada is very emphatic. That and nothing else is the explanation of his waiting. Because we see that Krishna could have easily have killed these Kurus as it was going on. And there's so many opportunities he had, when he was, even when the Pandavas were, just in the last stages of exile, when they actually came out of exile and they were in Virat's kingdom, and they had the war council. They called all their friends to come there, those who were willing to support them, and Yudhisthira, because Yudhisthira didn't want the war, he just didn't want to fight. So he asked Krishna, he didn't send him, he actually asked Krishna if he would go and be the emissary to the kingdom, or to the court of the Kauravas. So he went from Virat's kingdom, and his idea was to, avert the war. And he said, and he actually made different options, offers to the the Kauravas. And he said, even if you just give them, they need a kingdom because they're Kshatriyas. And actually, they weren't just ordinary Kshatriyas; they were like the leading Kshatriyas on the planet. And this is pointed out in the Gita. We see that that verse where Arjuna is saying, I've addressed you as Yadava, I've addressed you this. And the Acharyas point out the reason he was saying Yadava is because the Yadavas are a lesser Kshatriya race than the Kauravas. The Kauravas were the leading Kshatriya race. And because they're the leading Kshatriya race, they need a kingdom. And that's just the nature of a Kshatriya, is they need to have a kingdom, they need to have subjects to tax, things like this. This is how they function, this is how they live, is by ruling. And so he made this offer to the Kauravas, please give them a kingdom. But if you can't give them a kingdom, at least give them 5 villages so they can have something to rule over. And then, as we know, Duryodhana very cruelly said, I won't even give them as much land as they could drive a point of opinion to. I mean, how miserly is that? You could hold that much land in the palm of your hand, but he wouldn't even give them a handful of dirt. He's so miserly. And Prabhupada, in one place, he gave a definition of a miser. He said, a miser means that if my passing heir would benefit you, I'll hold it in. And this is what they were like. He was so miserly, he wouldn't even give a palmful of dirt. And so then Krishna, at that point, because they had this idea that, if we capture Krishna, the Pandavas they'll just lose all their enthusiasm to fight, and they'll be finished. So they had this plan where they were going to trap Krishna, and actually Duryodhana, because in those days it's not like you get on a plane, you kind of fly there and you're there in a few hours. It takes some time, but they had a system of messengers and stuff, so they knew ahead of time that Krishna was coming, and so they prepared a trap. Duryodhana, his brothers Shakuni, Karna, they prepared this trap for Krishna, where there was a trap door would open up and Krishna would fall into the basement and he'd be trapped, and he couldn't, and then that was the end of the Pandavas, end of story. They'd have the kingdom. And so they tried that, and then it didn't work. Krishna manifested a universal form, and Krishna and Prabhupada describes, the Acharyas describe how this was just a partial universal form, but we can see in this universal form that was manifested, Bhishma and Drona could see that. And even, actually, interestingly enough, Dhritarashtra could see this universal form. Because it was a transcendental form, he was able to see it. And still, Duryodhana was thinking he was going to capture Krishna, and he was thinking that Krishna was just performing some magic. And even at that point, we see that, Krishna, by his potency, manifested the universal form. He could have killed them all at that point, very easily. Every time, when the Kauravas tried to disrobe Draupadi, he could have easily have killed them. But he chose not to. And so Srila Prabhupada is making this point here, that, to kill them all at one time. But what was the purpose of trying to kill them all at one time? Was simply so he could glorify his devotees. And this is the point. Krishna is always trying to glorify his devotees. Even we see here with this whole pastime with Vidura, that there's this wonderful pastime is going on. And the Kauravas, they insulted, particularly Duryodhana and Dhritarashtra, they insulted Vidura and caused him to leave his home, etc. like that. But Vidura, we see in the previous verse saying, but I'm not bewildered by this, I understand what's going on. Krishna's simply making these arrangements to glorify his devotees. And he's always doing this, that verse, Paritranaya Saranam Vinishchaya Duskritam. Srila Prabhupada, in a number of different places, gives really interesting explanation of that verse. And he points out that really, the material nature can annihilate the miscreants. That's not a problem. All it takes is one tsunami and millions of people can be wiped out. Or a volcano exploding or whatever. We see millions of people can be wiped out by these natural disasters. Flooding, there's been massive flooding around the world, there's been severe bushfires. Millions of people can be wiped out by these things very quickly. So Prabhupada makes the point that actually this is not why Krishna comes. He doesn't really come to annihilate miscreants. He also points out that Vinishchaya Saranam, to save the devotees. He says the devotees are already saved. Because why? Because they're always thinking of Krishna. Therefore they're not saved. He says, so why does Krishna actually come? And then Prabhupada makes the point to engage in these loving pastimes with his associates, with his devotees. So he can glorify the devotees, so he can have loving exchange with the devotees. Because we see, especially if you look in the Vrindavan Leela, there's so many wonderful things that are happening in the Vrindavan Leela. But all these activities that Krishna and Balaram are performing, what they do ultimately is they just increase the love of the devotees. The devotees feel for Krishna and Balaram. Like there's so many wonderful, and especially in that Dhammarastakam we sing, it points out at the end of there, that these loving pastimes, childhood pastimes, they really, really deepen a devotee's love for Krishna. And there's many different descriptions there, and each time we hear of these, we think, oh, Krishna's so wonderful, Krishna's so amazing. I remember when I first started doing deity worship in Mayapur, that one of the things they do there is, and we also do it here by the way, is in the evening when you put the deities to bed, you sit in front of the deities and you read Krishna book to them for a while. And it's quite amazing because you're reading the Krishna book and you're looking at it and you think, this is you. It's really extraordinary, and these amazing pastimes. And it just helps to deepen our love for Krishna. So in this verse we see that there's two phrases or what do you call them that I find quite astounding. One is this what is it? Prapanarki. So this means he's willing to relieve the distresses, the distress of the people who are suffering in this world. It's quite extraordinary that Krishna has this nature that he's willing to relieve the distress of the anxiety of those who are suffering. But there's certain conditions, and we see that Krishna, he gives that condition in the end of the Gita. He says, what's that? Probably the most famous verse in the Bhagavad Gita that's gone out of my mind. Abandon all varieties of religion, surrender to me. I will deliver you from all sinful reactions. Do not fear. So he's explaining that just don't fear. I'll protect you. I'll deliver you from your sufferings, but surrender to me. And the other phrase I find quite astounding here is this Tri Madot Patanam. So Tri means three, Mada means pride, Utpatana, so Pata means the path. So they're on the path of pride. And and Prabhupada translates this here. He says, these kings who are constantly agitating the earth by their strong military movements carried out under the dictation of three kinds of false pride. And in the purport, Srila Prabhupada talks about how wealth, education, and followers, these are these three types of false pride. But there are many other aspects of pride. It's not just these three. And commenting on this verse also, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he points out that these three types of pride are wealth, education, and birth. So we're thinking, well, I'm born in a high family, or sometimes you see in marriage relationships, one partner might think that their birth is better than their other partner. This causes friction, or we can see that it was very common in certain parts of the world where it's actually interesting. Just a few days ago, maybe many of you haven't heard of him, but the person who's quite well known in Australian music circles, Archie Roach, passed away. So Archie Roach, he came from an Aboriginal background, and he was one of the stolen generation. Many of you aren't from Australia, so probably don't know much about the stolen generation. But there was a period in Australia's dark history where the government was taking Aboriginal children away from their families and telling their parents, we're going to give them a better life, they'll give them a life better than what you can give them. This is based on pride, because they're thinking white is better than black. It's another type, it's proud of their birth. And we see that this caused so much misery for so many people. And whenever we act out of pride, we can see that, I did a little bit of research on this because, being a proud person, it's something I need to learn about. It's something I need to learn how to overcome. And because, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, in his commentary here, he quotes a really interesting verse from the Mahabharata. He says, those who are blind with pride have pride in education, pride in wealth, and pride in birth. These persons are avoided by the wise. Because a proud person they're just all consumed with themselves. They're always consumed about, everything they have. I have so much possession, I have so much knowledge, I have so much beauty, I have whatever it is, whatever they're bewildered by. And it's all, in general you find it's quite consuming for them. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he explains that pride is a symptom of ignorance. Because it means you don't actually understand the nature of the self. You don't understand that our intrinsic position is this Jivera Surupa Hoy Krishnena Nityadas, that my position is an eternal servant of Krishna. Then there's another verse here from the Padma Purana. Within the heart of one who is full of anger or pride or lamentation on the state of his wife or sons, there is no possibility of Krishna being manifest. So if we have any pride in our heart, this will keep Krishna away from us. And there's so many, we see also in the Gita that pridelessness is described as knowledge. And actually, there's a really nice purport, the verses, I think it's in the 12th chapter, start, or maybe it's the 13th chapter, start, Adam Vitvam Namangitvam, those verses there. Then Prabhupada describes, because this Adam Vitvam, it actually means that without pride. Damba means pride. It's another, mana or damba, these are different words used for pride. So Prabhupada, he describes there in the purport, he says, without humility, one cannot have knowledge. And because you can have so much material knowledge, and we see people are so proud of their material knowledge, but that's not real knowledge. Real knowledge means knowledge of the self. Real knowledge means knowledge of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the relationship. This is real knowledge. Because I was mentioning the other day, in the 20th chapter of the Madhya Lila, Lord Chaitanya defines to Sanatana Goswami the three great treasures in life. So there's Krishna, there's service to Krishna, and there's love of Godhead. These are the three great treasures of life. And without this knowledge, without understanding what is the treasure of life, one will never actually understand Krishna. So it's very, very important. Then the really nice in the Bhagavatam 1:17-27, you may remember that's the point where the age of Kali is starting to manifest, or it's being described how the age of Kali is manifesting, and Parikshit comes across this black person who's beating the bull. And then it said, in the age of Satya, truthfulness, your 4 legs were established by, this is Parikshit talking to the bull, were established by the bull who's Dharma. In the age of Satya, truthfulness, your 4 legs were established by the 4 principles of austerity, cleanliness, mercy, and truthfulness. But it appears that 3 of your legs are broken due to rampant irreligion in the form of pride, lust for women, and intoxication. And Prabhupada goes on to explain in the purport there that as Brahminical principles dwindle, so these 4 principles, they're termed as being religious principles or Brahminical principles, as these things dwindle, the austerity, cleanliness, mercy, and truthfulness, then these irreligious principles, pride, lust for women, and intoxication, these things become more prominent. And if you look around you in the world, you don't have to look very far. You can see everywhere that these irreligious principles are prominent. And this is because religious principles are reduced. And we see, like as Krishna, he declares, he says, whenever these religious principles become diminished and the religious principles manifest, then I myself will appear. So he may appear as an incarnation, as he did when he came, 5,000 years ago, or even 500 years ago, or he may appear in the form of his holy name, or he may appear. There's so many ways he can appear. Even as he declares in the Bhagavad Gita, he's death personified. So he can appear in that way also. And so we'll see, like what's going on in the world right now, with all these wars not wars yet, but they're pending. This is a result of pride, of arrogance, of ignorance, of essentially of irreligious principles that are becoming more and more prominent in this world. And at some point, it may not be in our lifetime, it may take longer. At some point, Krishna's going to round up all these atheists and finish them in a shortcut method, as Prabhupada's describing here. So at some point it's going to happen. So we should not be surprised when we see these things happening. Why? It's because it's due to irreligious principles, because they're neglecting the prime duty of humanity, which is to understand that their nature as eternal servants of Krishna. And only when we can, develop a degree of humility, if we don't give up pride, we'll never understand our intrinsic nature as a servant of Krishna. We want to think that, no, I'm the Lord, I'm the Master, I'm the controller, I'm the enjoyer. Krishna describes this in the Gita very clearly. This Ishvaraham Aham Bhogi Sivaham Balavam Sukhi, that I'm the controller, I'm the enjoyer, I'm powerful, I'm strong, I have so many friends. These are all elements of pride, symptoms of pride. And as long as pride is there, we'll never understand the nature of the self. We'll never understand who we are. We'll never understand Krishna. So it's very, very important that and Krishna says, Nirmana moha jita sangha dosha adhyatma jita, that he starts off nirmana, without pride. He's talking about the symptoms of a saintly person. No pride. No lamentation, no illusion. We need to cultivate this very actively in our lives in order to understand who we are, in order to understand Krishna. We need to cultivate these things very actively. And even we see that, like Kunti, she also mentions this verse from the 8th chapter of the first canto. She says, Janmashvai Shrutashidbe, Edamanamada, Navahati Abhidatum by Tomakinchana Gochara. That she says, my Lord, you're easily approached, very, very easily approached, but only by those who are materially exhausted. Meaning that they're not proud, they're not proud, they're not trying to cultivate, or gain a high birth, not trying to increase their opulence or their knowledge or their beauty. But if you look at this society now, everything is focused on trying to improve themselves in those ways. Everything. You just go into the Sunnyside Mall, in our local town, you can see they've got this, I don't know what they call those places, where they do their fingernails. And it's just like, what a waste of time, sitting there just like painting your fingernails up fancy, and who even notices, But they're just so obsessed with the body, because they're obsessed with trying to improve. They think it's going to make them happy. But then they see someone who's got nicer fingernails than them, they become so envious. And they have to go and spend more money to get their fingernails even better, or their hairdo, or whatever, It's just the nature, because they're bewildered by the influence of false ego, thinking themselves to be the controller, thinking themselves to be the enjoyer. Therefore, they're pushed to do these things. But as devotees of Krishna, we need to understand that we're not this material body. We're Krishna's eternal servant. And use the same energy in Krishna's service. Then we'll become peaceful. Then we'll become happy. But if we're trying to improve ourselves in this material world, we'll never know peace. And we're going to see, you just watch, these materialistic people, these governments, they will never know peace. Because why? Because they deny Krishna. They reject Krishna. They don't see religiosity as being the most important thing in life. They just think it's something you can do if you want, but it's not really that important. So this is why these things are happening in this world, is because people ultimately are rejecting Krishna. Even people who are so-called religious are rejecting God because they're not giving their lives to the service of God. Okay, any comments, questions? Yes, Margie.
Hare Krishna, thank you very much for your talk. And my question will be about the war at Kurukshetra. It was arranged by Krishna, and it was the last war in the world, which happened according to the laws of karma. To the laws of dharma. And but nowadays the wars are different. How should we take those wars? Should we take sides? Because when we're reading about Kurukshetra war, we are all on the side of the Pandavas, because that's how that's how I feel. But nowadays, the wars should we take the same as it was arranged by Krishna, and should we take sides, or how to, what should be an attitude towards the wars nowadays? Thank you.
Thank you. So, all the wars are coming about due to karma. The whole material world is moving due to karma. So we can see that, the living entities are involved in these wars, both sides. It's due to their past karma, due to their activities, whether in this life, in previous lives, whatever. And in terms of taking sides, just like, okay, what's going on in Ukraine and Russia? There's devotees who live in Russia, there's devotees who live in Ukraine. So we don't take sides in these things because ultimately it's all driven by material desire. So are you going to say that this material desire is better than that material desire? No. The Vaishnava is compassionate upon all living entities, not just human beings, but all living entities. You look at, for instance, what's going on in this war or special military operation, or whatever you call it, in Ukraine right now, is causing distress to so many living entities. It's causing distress to, the human beings in Ukraine. It's causing distress to the animals. It's causing distress to the plants. It's also causing distress to the planet. And it's also causing distress for people in Russia. Every month we have a meeting with representatives in the deity worship ministry around the world, and so every month we have meetings there, and our representatives in Russia were informing us about all the things they're doing for devotees in Russia and devotees in Ukraine. So we're non-partisan with these things. We don't take sides, because we understand it's driven by material desire. We don't take sides in material desires, because it's all denying Krishna. It's all devoid of Krishna consciousness. So our business is to try to be compassionate and to, especially in these moments of distress, to try to give them a little bit of Krishna consciousness. And you'll see that in these places there's a lot of prasad distribution going on right now. Of course, we could go in there and tell them, you're suffering because of your sinful activities and because of your sinful desires, but that's not really going to help. What we need to do is somehow or other help them to see that they're eternal servants of Krishna, and that's the only way they're going to find peace and happiness in this world, by seeing that. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Yes, Mangala Mataji.
Could you just say again about those three things, lamentation, and the other two things? I forgot what you said, but I thought it was interesting, that lamentation, the relationship with lamentation and pride, because we usually think it's just, people who are really heavy,
Yeah,
or bullies or something.
I think I might have been quoting from the verse in the 15th chapter of the Gita, which says, those who are freed from false prestige, illusion, false association, and who understand the eternal are done with material lust. Was that the verse I'm not sure.
No, you quoted from
Well,
Vishwanath.
So many Vaishnavas. Let me see if I can find it then.
Lamentation, anger, and
Oh yeah, this is from Padma Purana. Within the heart of one who is full of anger or pride or lamentation on the state of his wife or sons, there is no possibility of Krishna being manifest. Yeah, so yeah, well, lament, because the point is, it's like, okay, lamenting about something material is still material. You may be lamenting about your lack of Krishna consciousness. That's okay, and we see, like, in the lives of great devotees, especially the songs of Narottam Das Thakur or Bhaktivinoda Thakur. There's lamentation there, but then or what's that? Jayanilo Premadana. That song's is entitled, Lamentation Due to the Separation of the Vaishnavas. So that's transcendental lamentation. But if you're lamenting, like it's saying here, about the state of your wives or sons, that's very material.
Or you mentioned that you're not achieving something.
Yeah, you're not achieving some gain you want. It's material. Yeah. So anything material is or driven by material desire or whatever, ultimately is not going to be helpful for us in our spiritual journey. Nothing, do you have a...
I just wanted to add, because it made me think about all the things that are going on. Like, there's a lot of people that are very anti-facts and super facts and all these conspiracy theories to believe that we're done. But I was thinking about that because of that, and I think that applies to that as well. Like, it doesn't really matter what is real and not. What matters is basically that we need to go back to Krishna, and that's the main focus.
Yeah. The whole material world's a conspiracy. It's Maya's conspiracy to keep us here. Yeah.
Because people also want to have control, right? It's like, oh, why is the weather like this? Or what is going on with this?
Yeah.
Like, what does it really matter in the end, really?
Yeah. It's all
As a devotee.
it's all temporary, fleeting. If we just take shelter of Krishna, I think Sharkar has a comment or a question or something. Probably.
Yeah, Prabhu, just a little comment about pride, which I've observed a lot, even in myself, especially, I would say in myself, is that, as it says here, we can develop pride in certain possessions, but I find the most pernicious thing about pride is you can lose everything and still have your pride. Something that has to be, and therefore in that verse you quoted, Amaripam Adambipam, Prabhupada, Krishna says humility first, but then he says pridelessness. And unless there's complete humility, there'll be some pride.
Yeah.
And so pridelessness, completely no pride, it has to be let go of completely. Even in regard to humility, I mean, you can be proud of your humility, It's a very nasty thing. The only thing is that it has to be completely let go.
Yes, I'm more humble than you, Prabhu.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly it.
Yeah. Prabhupada, he makes the...
It's insidious. It's one of those intangible, invisible things that can, before you know it, take over your entire consciousness.
Yeah. Prabhupada would often make the point, in this material world, the pauper is proud of his penny.
Yeah.
He's got nothing. I mean, a penny, it's nothing, but they're proud of it.
Yeah. You mentioned about HG Nrsimha. There's one lecture on that verse where Prabhupada's HG means you don't have anything. And he talked about how on a train ride one time in India, he noticed this very poor man got on board the train and he had a bag full of half-burnt sticks. And it was very clear that that was his possession.
I saw exactly the same thing on a train in India once.
Yeah.
And it's just astounding. It's like, for me, it has zero value.
Yes.
Burnt bits of wood, but for him, because he's so poor, it's, yeah.
It's like street people, they get that old shopping trolley and they've got all bags of stuff in it.
All that junk they carry around with them. Yeah? And they're really attached to it.
They're
You know, and it's,
they fight for it.
yeah. Yeah, it's like that in this material world. It's like, as long as you have attachment for any of those things, you're not going anywhere. You're going to stay here. And your point is very relevant, is like this pridelessness, we have to give up pride. Without pride, we're stuck here. Salmangala Vaji.
Just thinking, sometimes we think something's not fair when we get our pride smashed. Krishna's very kind because he often relieves us of that burden one way or another.
Yeah.
You can't do it yourself.
But yeah, that's a really good point you bring up also, because I had an experience yesterday. I was just parked up at what's that place? Point Danger. I don't know if anyone knows where Point Danger is, where the Captain Cook Lighthouse is up on the border. Anyhow, so I was parked up there, and it was quite windy, and I opened the door of the car to get something out. Actually, it was cold, so I wanted to put my base layer on, and so then, just as a gust of wind blew up and just whipped out a receipt and just blew it, down the road under the car. And I closed the door. I thought I need that, because I have to keep, for my GBC funding, I have to keep accounts and stuff like that, everything I buy. So then I went looking for the receipt, and I looked under the car. I couldn't find it. I thought, maybe it's blown down the road. So I walked down the road looking for it. I couldn't find it. Then I walked back to the car. It's just there on the ground, flapping like that. And I said, Krishna, you're so clever. If we can give all credit to Krishna for everything, then we can give up pride. But if we take credit for ourselves, that's pride. And that's the only way we're going to give up pride and become humble, is to give all credit to Krishna for everything. Because, and I was listening to a class the other day, and Prabhupada was making this point. He's like, he was talking about himself. He says, he was, whatever he was doing at that point in time, he's saying, I have so much ability to do this. I can translate these books, I can do what, but in a moment, it can be gone. And there's no warning. You may think, well, I'm young now, so it's not going to happen to me. Don't fool yourself. Don't fool yourself. In one moment, we could all be sitting here, and I was in the USA when the World Trade Towers came down, and just after the World Trade Towers were crashed into by these planes, a plane was flying out from LaGuardia Airport, and one of the engines dropped off and went through the roof of a house. Luckily, there was no one in the house. But we could be sitting here, and there's a glide path to the airport here. The planes go here every day. There's hundreds of planes every day go past. One of them could drop its engine, come right through the roof of the temple. We're all gone. So don't think that whatever it is I've got is of any consequence or any meaning. It's all so temporary. It's all so fleeting. It could be gone in a moment. On that cheerful note, Srila Prabhupada ki, Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda ki, Jai Nitai Gaur Premanandi.